The transport ship shook hard as it docked with Axis Point Citadel. Ria Vasquez grabbed the overhead rail and steadied herself while the other passengers stumbled. She had been on ships before, but nothing like this station. Through the viewport, the Citadel stretched out in every direction like a metal city floating in the dark of space. Lights blinked across its surface in patterns she did not recognize. Somewhere inside that massive structure, 40 different species trained together to become officers of the Galactic Union military. She was one of 6 humans selected this cycle, 6 out of 8 billion. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Ria stepped into the arrival hall. The air tasted different here. It was clean but carried a faint chemical sweetness, something the environmental systems added to keep dozens of species comfortable at the same time. The ceiling was so high above her that she could barely see it. The floor beneath her boots was smooth, dark stone, polished by years of feet, claws, and things she had no name for. All around her, beings moved in every direction. She saw tall creatures covered in black scales walking in pairs. She saw small round beings that floated a few inches above the ground, humming softly to themselves. She saw a group of insectoids clicking their mandibles in rapid conversation, and she saw the way many of them looked at her, some with curiosity, some with pity, a few with open dislike. Humans had only been part of the Galactic Union for 12 years. In galactic terms, that was nothing. Most species here had been members for centuries. To them, humans were the new arrivals. The small, soft, short-lived creatures from a violent little world who somehow talked their way into the Union. Ria kept her eyes forward and followed the signs to the cadet barracks. Her assigned room was small but functional. 2 bunks, 2 storage units, 1 shared workspace. Her bunkmate was already there. The creature stood nearly as tall as Ria but was covered in a smooth green exoskeleton. 2 large compound eyes turned toward her, and a pair of thin antennae rose in what Ria hoped was a friendly gesture. "You are the human," the creature said. Her voice was soft and had a slight clicking rhythm to it. "I am Lisk, Velani species. I have read about your world. You have an extraordinary number of ways to kill each other." Ria set her bag on the lower bunk and smiled. "Nice to meet you too, Lisk." Over the next few days, Ria settled into the routine of the academy. Morning briefings at 600 hours, physical conditioning from 7 to 9, classroom instruction in strategy, navigation, xenobiology, and union law until midday. Afternoon sessions covered weapons systems, field medicine, and combat doctrine. Every minute was scheduled. Every moment was evaluated. Ria did well in the classroom. Her scores in strategy and tactical planning were among the highest in her section. She had a natural ability to see patterns in data and predict outcomes before they fully developed. Her navigation scores were strong. Her knowledge of xenobiology surprised several instructors who did not expect a human to know so much about alien anatomy. But in the physical assessments, she was average at best. She could not outrun the Dralith, whose 4 legs carried them at terrifying speed. She could not outfight the Gorvani, whose stone-like bodies could absorb punishment that would kill her 10 times over. She could not match the reflexes of the Silith, whose nervous systems processed information 3 times faster than hers. On paper, she was simply an ordinary human in a building full of biological superiors. Nobody paid much attention to her. That was fine. She preferred it that way. It was Lisk who first warned her about Torvon Drekar. They were sitting in the barracks after evening meal, and Lisk was grooming her antennae with careful, nervous movements. "He teaches advanced combat doctrine," Lisk said quietly. "He is Krethsari. Do you know them?" Ria nodded. She had studied them. The Krethsari were reptilian predators averaging 7 feet tall, covered in natural bone plating. Their culture was built entirely around martial strength. They measured worth by combat ability. Weakness was not just undesirable in their society, it was shameful. "He does not like species he considers beneath him," Lisk continued. 3 cadets have already left the program because of him. He did not break any rules. He simply made their lives so difficult that they chose to leave. The academy did nothing because he never crossed a line they could act on. And he does not like humans, Rhea said. It was not a question. Lisk's antennae flattened against her head. He calls your species endurance scavengers. He has said publicly that the Union wastes resources by allowing humans into the academy. Rhea was quiet for a moment. She thought about the years of training she had done back on Earth. The Pacific Rim Combat School, where she had learned to fight opponents who were bigger, faster, and stronger than her every single day. She thought about the philosophy her instructors had drilled into her. You will always face something more powerful than you. Your job is not to be more powerful. Your job is to understand power and redirect it. I will be fine, she told Lisk. Her first encounter with Torvald came 2 days later. He stood at the front of the combat hall, a massive arena with tiered seating that could hold hundreds of cadets. He was everything the files said he would be. 7 feet of scaled muscle and bone armor. 4 clawed hands that could tear through light metal. Yellow eyes with vertical pupils that scanned the room like a predator watching a herd. He spoke in a deep, grinding voice that filled the hall without any amplification. He talked about combat readiness, about the reality of interspecies conflict, about how the battlefield did not care about your feelings or your politics. Then his eyes found Rhea. I see we have a human in this section, he said. The words were casual, but his tone carried an edge like a blade wrapped in cloth. Tell me, Cadet, on your world, what is the most dangerous predator? Rhea stood. Humans, sir. A few cadets laughed. Torvald did not. Amusing, he said slowly. A species with no claws, no armor, no venom, and bones that break if you squeeze too hard calls itself a predator. He turned to the rest of the class. This is what the Union sends us. Endurance scavengers who learn to throw rocks and now believe they belong among warriors. Rhea said nothing. She stood calmly, her hands at her sides, her breathing steady. She did not argue. She did not flinch. She simply looked at him the way a student looks at a problem that has not yet been solved. Torvald stared at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Not respect. Something closer to irritation. He had expected her to react, to argue, to shrink, to show some crack he could press against. She gave him nothing. He turned away and continued his lecture. After the class, Lisk caught up with Rhea in the corridor. You handled that well, she said. Rhea shrugged. He is testing, that is all. He wants me to react so he has a reason to push harder. What will you do? Rhea looked back toward the combat hall. The same thing humans have always done when something bigger wants to eat us, she said quietly. Watch, learn, wait. The next morning, the duty roster updated with a new announcement from Torvald. The following session of Advanced Combat Doctrine would include live sparring demonstrations. Participants would be selected by the instructor personally. Lisk read the notice 3 times, her antennae trembling. Rhea read it once, then went to the training room alone. She pulled up every file the Academy had on Krethsari anatomy. She studied their bone structure, their joint articulation limits, their nerve clusters, their balance systems. She read for 4 hours without stopping. Then she slept, and she slept well. The combat hall was full. Every seat in the observation tiers was taken, and cadets who could not find seats stood along the walls. Word had spread through the barracks overnight. Torvald Drekar was selecting sparring partners personally, and everyone knew what that meant. Everyone knew who he would choose. Rhea walked in with the rest of her section and took her assigned seat near the middle tier. Lisk sat beside her, and the Velani had not stopped clicking her mandibles nervously since they left the barracks. Her antennae were pressed so flat against her head that they almost disappeared. This is not right, Lisk whispered. An instructor sparring a first-year cadet is permitted under Academy rules, but it almost never happens. The last time was 11 years ago, and the cadet spent 3 weeks in medical recovery. I know, Rhea said. The Krethsari are 3 times your mass. His bone plating alone weighs more than your entire body. His claws can cut through. Lisk, Rhea put a hand on her friend's arm. I know. The Velani looked at her with those large compound eyes, searching for some sign of fear. She found none, and somehow that made her more worried, not less. Torvald entered the combat hall through the main floor door, and the room fell silent. He moved with the heavy, deliberate steps of a creature that had never in its life needed to hurry. His bone plates caught the overhead lights and threw dull reflections across the arena floor. Behind him, 2 assistant instructors carried equipment cases and began setting up monitoring stations around the edge of the circular fighting area. The arena itself was a flat circle, 20 meters across, made of the same dark stone as the rest of the station, but embedded with sensors that tracked movement, impact force, and biological readings. The gravity in the hall was set to standard Union level, which was slightly heavier than what Rhea had grown up with on Earth. She had spent her first week at the academy adjusting to it. Now it felt normal. Almost. Torvald stood at the center of the arena and addressed the class. His deep voice rolled through the hall like distant thunder. He spoke about the reality of interspecies combat, how different body types created different advantages and weaknesses, how a soldier must understand not only their own capabilities, but the capabilities of everything they might face on a battlefield. He ran 3 demonstration bouts first, a Draelith against another Draelith, 2 Gorvani cadets in a grappling match that shook the floor, a quick, sharp exchange between 2 Silith that was almost too fast to follow. Each bout was between cadets of the same or similar species, fair matches, balanced opponents, the kind of sparring the academy normally conducted. Then Torvald stopped the demonstrations and turned to face the observation tiers. Combat in the real galaxy is not fair, he said. You will not face enemies who match your size, your speed, or your strength. You will face enemies who are better than you in every way that matters. The question is not whether you can win. The question is whether you understand your own limitations well enough to survive. He paused and let his yellow eyes sweep across the room. Cadet Vasquez, come to the floor. The silence that followed was so complete that Rhea could hear the hum of the station's power systems through the walls. She stood up. Around her, hundreds of eyes and sensory organs turned in her direction. She felt their attention like heat on her skin. She walked down the steps of the observation tier, her boots making soft sounds on each step. She crossed the gap between the seating and the arena floor and stepped onto the dark stone circle. The sensors beneath her feet activated with a faint blue glow. Torvald stood across from her. The difference between them was almost absurd. He towered over her by more than 2 feet. His body was a fortress of scaled muscle and bone armor. His 4-clawed hands hung at his sides like weapons waiting to be used. His tail, thick and heavy, shifted slowly behind him for balance. Rhea was 5 feet 6 inches tall. She weighed 62 kilograms. She had no claws, no armor, no tail. She wore the standard academy training uniform, which offered no protection at all. This will be a cross-species readiness evaluation, Torvald announced to the class. The purpose is to demonstrate how different biological profiles perform under direct combat pressure. He looked down at Rhea. Cadet, do you have any objections? Rhea looked up at him. She kept her voice calm and clear, loud enough for the whole hall to hear. Is this an official evaluation or a voluntary demonstration, sir? The question was precise. If it was voluntary, she could decline. If it was official, it would go on her record either way, but at least the Academy's oversight systems would be fully engaged. She was asking him to commit to what he was doing in front of witnesses. Something flickered behind Torvald's eyes, annoyance perhaps that she had not simply accepted. It is mandatory, he said. Understood, sir. She stepped to the center of the arena and faced him. In the observation tier, Lisk was gripping the armrest of her seat so tightly that the metal was bending under her claws. Beside her, A Dralith cadet named Morvek leaned forward, his 4 eyes wide. A young Krethsari cadet named Salith watched from the back row with an expression no one could read. On the arena floor, Rhea began to prepare. She did not make a show of it. She simply rolled her shoulders once, loosened her hands, and adjusted her stance so that her weight was centered over her hips. She bent her knees slightly. She began to breathe in a slow, deliberate rhythm. In through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 2, out through the mouth for 6. Her heart rate, visible on the arena monitors, dropped. The cadets watching noticed this. A few murmured in confusion. Her heart rate was going down, not up. She was not panicking, she was loading. Every combat instructor Rhea had ever trained under on Earth had taught her the same fundamental truth. You are small. You are fragile. You will always face something that can destroy you with raw force. Your only advantage is your mind. Use it before the fight begins, and the fight is already over. She watched Torvan as he paced slowly at his end of the arena. He was talking to the class, explaining Krethsari combat stances, but Rhea was not listening to his words. She was listening to his body. She watched how his weight shifted when he turned. She noticed that his left leg bore slightly more load than his right. She saw how his bone plates overlapped on his chest but left small gaps at the sides where his torso needed to twist. She observed the way his neck moved and identified the point just below his jaw ridge, where the bone ended and softer tissue began. She had studied Krethsari anatomy for 4 hours the night before. Now she was confirming everything with her own eyes, theory becoming reality, data becoming a plan. Torvan finished his explanation and turned to face her. He dropped into a Krethsari combat stance, his legs spread wide. His clawed hands came up, open and ready. His bone plates along his shoulders and forearms flared outward, making him look even larger. His tail stiffened behind him like a counterweight. This was the opening posture of Krethsari martial tradition. It was designed to intimidate. It said, without words, that you were facing a predator and you were prey. Rhea looked at that stance and she saw something Torvan did not expect her to see. She saw the gaps. She saw the joints. She saw the points where size became a weakness instead of a strength. She settled her weight 1 inch lower. Her hands came up, open and relaxed. Not fists. Open palms, fingers slightly curved. The stance of someone who did not intend to hit hard. The stance of someone who intended to use whatever force came at her and send it somewhere else. The arena timer activated. A single tone rang through the combat hall. The fight had begun. Torvan's muscles tensed, his claws flexed, his yellow eyes locked onto her like targeting systems. Rhea breathed out slowly and waited. Torvan moved first. He launched himself forward with an explosive push from both legs. The arena floor cracked slightly under the force of his start. 250 kilograms of bone, muscle, and scale crossed the distance between them in less than a heartbeat. His right arm swung forward in a wide arc, claws spread, aimed directly at Rhea's left shoulder. Among the Krethsari, this was the opening dominance grab. It was not meant to kill. It was meant to seize, to slam, to pin a smaller opponent against the ground and hold them there until they submitted. It was the move a predator used on prey to show that the fight was never a fight at all. Just a demonstration of where each creature stood in the natural order. The cadets in the observation tier saw the blur of his movement and most of them looked away or flinched. A Gorveni cadet closed 2 of his 4 eyes. Lisk's mandibles locked shut. Everyone expected the same thing. The human would go down. The human would be pinned. The human would learn her place. Rhea did not go down. In the first second she moved. Not backward, not to the side. She moved forward and slightly to her right, stepping into the arc of his swing rather than away from it. His clawed hand passed over her left shoulder by less than 2 inches. She felt the wind of it brush her ear. She felt the heat of his body as she slipped inside his reach, so close to his chest that his bone plates were right in front of her face. His arm was still extended from the swing. It was committed. 250 kilograms of momentum does not stop on command. His body was leaning forward, his weight shifting onto his leading foot, and his right arm was stretched out behind her where it had missed its target. Rhea's left hand came up and pressed against the inside of his right elbow. Not a strike, a press. She pushed the joint inward, against the direction it was designed to bend. Crethsari elbow joints had a wide range of outward motion but very limited inward flexibility. This was well documented in xenobiology texts, but it was one thing to read about it in a classroom and another thing entirely to exploit it in real time against a moving opponent. She applied pressure to exactly the right point and his arm locked. The joint could not complete its motion. His own strength became a trap because the harder his muscles pulled, the more firmly the joint seized. The arena monitors recorded the first second. Heart rate data showed that Rhea's pulse had increased by only 4 beats per minute. Torvand's had spiked by 30. In the second, Rhea used his frozen arm as a lever. She rotated her body, turning her back partially toward him, and drove her right hip into the gap between his lower chest plates. Every Crethsari had this gap. It was where the rigid bone armor of the upper chest met the more flexible plating of the abdomen. The gap was narrow, barely 4 inches wide, but it was softer than the surrounding armor. More importantly, it was a pressure point. The nerve bundle beneath that gap connected to the Crethsari balance system. Their species had evolved on a heavy gravity world with rough terrain, and their inner equilibrium was controlled by a cluster of nerves that ran along the lower ribcage. Press it hard enough, and their brain received a signal that the ground was no longer beneath them. Rhea did not need to press hard. She needed to press precisely. Her hip bone found the gap and she pushed. At the same time, her right forearm came up and struck the side of his throat just below the jaw ridge. Again, not with crushing force. She did not have crushing force. She had accuracy. The spot she hit was where the Crethsari spatial orientation nerves connected to the brain stem. It was protected by bone on the front and sides, but just below the jaw ridge, where the neck needed to turn, there was a patch of softer tissue no bigger than her palm. She hit both points at the same time, hip into the balance nerve cluster, forearm into the orientation nerve. The arena sensors recorded the second. In the 3rd second, Torvand fell. His legs simply stopped working, not because they were damaged, not because she had broken anything, but because his brain received 2 simultaneous signals that told it the world had tilted sideways and the ground was gone. His inner equilibrium collapsed like a table with its legs kicked out. His muscles, all of them, tensed in the wrong directions at once as his body tried to correct for a fall that was not happening the way it expected. He went backward. 250 kilograms of Crethsari officer hit the arena floor with a sound that echoed through the entire combat hall. The stone cracked in a spiderweb pattern beneath him. His bone plates clattered against the surface. His tail slammed down a half-second later. The impact registered on the arena sensors as a force equivalent to a small vehicle crash. Rhea stepped back, 1 step, 2 steps. She lowered her hands to her sides, her palms were open, her breathing was unchanged. The arena monitors confirmed it. Her heart rate had peaked at 68 beats per minute, a light jog, a brisk walk upstairs. The combat hall was silent. Not quiet, not hushed, silent. The kind of silence that happens when every brain in a room is trying to process something that does not fit into any existing category. The kind of silence that follows the impossible. Torvand lay on his back. His yellow eyes were open. He was fully conscious. He was uninjured. The arena medical sensors confirmed no broken bones, no torn tissue, no internal damage of any kind. She had not hurt him. She had simply put him on the ground. But among the Crethsari, being on your back meant something very specific. In their warrior culture, a fighter on their back was not just defeated, they were dismissed. It meant the opponent had not considered you worth the effort of a real fight. It was the deepest humiliation their society recognized. Worse than injury, Worse than death. It meant you were nothing. Torvald knew this. Every Krethsari in the room knew this, and every other species who had studied Krethsari culture knew it too. Rhea looked down at him. There was no anger in her face, no triumph, no satisfaction. She looked at him the way you look at a problem that turned out to be simpler than you expected. "Humans study what we cannot overpower, sir," she said. Her voice was quiet but carried in the absolute silence of the hall. "It is how we survived our own planet." Nobody moved. In the back row, a Dralith cadet leaned toward the person next to him and whispered. The words were barely audible, but several nearby cadets heard them clearly. She did not even hit him hard. On the arena floor, Torvald lay still for 4 seconds, then 5. Then he moved slowly, carefully. He rolled to his side and pushed himself up to one knee, then to his feet. He stood at his full height and looked down at Rhea. His expression was something no one in the room could fully read. It was not rage, though rage was certainly part of it. It was not shame, though shame was there too. It was something deeper, something that looked almost like confusion. As if the world had just told him something he had believed his entire life was wrong, and he did not yet know what to do with that information. He said nothing. He turned away from her and walked to the edge of the arena. He picked up his instructor's datapad. He looked at it for a moment without reading it. Then he said, in a voice that was almost normal, "Class dismissed." Nobody moved at first. Then, slowly, cadets began to stand. The sound of shuffling feet and clicking claws and rustling wings filled the hall. But the conversations that should have followed a normal class did not happen. People walked out in near silence, glancing at each other, glancing at Rhea, glancing at Torvald's back. Lisk reached Rhea at the edge of the arena. The Velani's entire body was trembling. Her antennae were standing straight up, which Rhea had learned meant extreme emotional overload. 3 seconds, Lisk said. Her voice was barely a whisper. That was 3 seconds. Rhea nodded. She flexed her left hand a few times. The press against his elbow had bruised her palm slightly. That was her only injury. "Are you all right?" Lisk asked. Rhea looked at her friend. For just a moment, something real showed through the calm surface. A flash of something in her eyes. Relief, maybe. Or the delayed acknowledgement that she had just done something very dangerous and it had worked only because years of preparation met a single moment of execution. "I am fine," she said. "Let us go eat." They left the combat hall together. Behind them, Torvald stood alone on the arena floor, staring at the crack in the stone where he had fallen. The arena sensors were still active. They recorded him standing there motionless for 11 minutes before he finally turned off the lights and left. By the next morning, the footage was everywhere. At least a dozen cadets had recorded the sparring match on personal devices. Academy regulations technically prohibited unauthorized recording in the combat hall, but nobody had enforced that rule in years, and the instructors had never cared enough to check. Within 6 hours of the bout, the clips were circulating on internal Academy networks. Within 12 hours, they had jumped to the wider Access Point Citadel communication grid. Within 48 hours, the footage was on Union-wide public networks, viewed by billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. Someone gave it a title that stuck, 3 seconds on Access Point. Rhea learned about this when Lisk woke her up at 4 in the morning. By shaking her shoulder with both hands and clicking so fast that her translator could barely keep up. "You are on the feeds," Lisk said. "All of the feeds, every species network. I counted 47 separate uploads of the same footage with different commentary. A Dralith news analyst called it the most efficient takedown in Academy history. A Velani cultural channel is running a special on human combat traditions. There is a Gorvani debate forum arguing about whether you cheated." Rhea sat up in her bunk and rubbed her eyes. "Did I cheat?" "No, the arena sensors recorded everything. Every movement you made was open hand, non-lethal, and within standard sparring regulations. You did not even close your fists." then it does not matter what a debate forum thinks. Rhea lay back down and closed her eyes. Wake me at 6. But it did matter. Not the debate forum specifically, but the wave of attention that followed. Over the next several days, the academy became a different place for Rhea. Cadets who had never spoken to her before suddenly wanted to talk. Some were genuinely curious. Others wanted to test her, to see if the footage was real or if it was some kind of trick. A Silith cadet challenged her to a reflex test. A Gorvani cadet asked her to demonstrate the technique she had used on Torvan. She declined both politely. The reactions from outside the academy were louder and more complicated. Among the Krethsari, the response was fury. Their military command issued a formal statement calling the bout an irregular and culturally disrespectful exercise, and demanded that Rhea be disciplined for using what they called an ambush technique. They argued that she had exploited classified biological vulnerabilities. Union analysts quickly pointed out that Krethsari nerve cluster locations were published in standard xenobiology textbooks available to every cadet in the academy. Nothing Rhea had used was secret. She had simply read the material and applied it. The Krethsari demand for her expulsion was reviewed and denied. The Academy's oversight board noted that Torvan had initiated the bout, that Rhea had asked for clarification on its status before participating, and that her response had been entirely defensive. She had not attacked him. She had redirected his own attack and used the resulting opening to end the fight. By the combat standards of nearly every species except the Krethsari, her actions were not just acceptable. They were a model of restraint. This did not make the Krethsari any less angry. On the human side, the response was predictable. Earth's media networks ran the story for a full week. Opinion shows debated it endlessly. Commentators who had never been within 10 light-years of the Academy suddenly had strong opinions about interspecies combat doctrine. Rhea's name was mentioned in 3 separate government speeches. A merchandise company on Earth started selling shirts that said 3 seconds before Rhea even knew about it. The human military delegation at the Union was less enthusiastic. A message came through official channels advising Rhea to maintain a low profile and avoid any further confrontations. The message was polite but firm. The subtext was clear. You have made a point. Now stop making it. Rhea had no desire to make any more points. She had not wanted to make this one. The person who addressed the situation directly was Commandant Ira Saul. The head of the academy was a Kuheltari, a species made of living crystal that could live for thousands of years. Ira Saul was old even by Kuheltari standards. Her body was a framework of pale blue crystal that chimed softly when she moved. Her voice was like wind through glass, clear and musical and impossible to ignore. She summoned both Torvan and Rhea to her office on the same day, but at different times. Rhea went first. The commandant's office was at the top of the academy's central tower. The walls were transparent, showing the stars in every direction. Ira Saul stood by the window, her crystalline body catching the light of a distant nebula. "Cadet Vasquez," she said without turning around, "you have created quite a discussion." "That was not my intention, Commandant." "No, I do not believe it was." Ira Saul turned to face her. The Kuheltari had no eyes in the traditional sense, but Rhea felt seen more completely than she had ever felt in her life. "Tell me, when Officer Drekar called you to the arena floor, what did you feel?" Rhea considered the question carefully. "Fear," she said, "and then focus." "In that order?" "Yes, Commandant, always in that order." Ira Saul was quiet for a moment. The crystals of her body hummed at a frequency that Rhea felt in her chest. "You may go, Cadet. Continue your studies. Let the noise fade on its own." Torvan's meeting with the Commandant happened an hour later. Rhea did not know exactly what was said, but Lisk heard from a Velani administrative aide that Ira Saul had asked Torvan a single question. She asked him to explain why a senior officer with 17 years of combat experience felt it necessary to spar a first-year cadet in front of her peers. When he tried to frame it as a training exercise, the commandant interrupted him with 5 words that several staff members overheard through the door. "The lesson was received, Officer Drekar, but I wonder if it was the one you intended to teach." Within a week, Torvan was reassigned from direct instruction to a research and evaluation role. The official reason was a routine rotation. Nobody believed it. He still walked the corridors of the academy, but he no longer stood in front of a class. When he passed Rhea in the hallway, he looked through her as if she did not exist. The weeks that followed were both better and harder for Rhea. Better because the open hostility from instructors stopped. Harder because the attention from everyone else did not. She handled it the same way she handled everything. She kept her routine. She attended every class. She trained every evening. She studied late into the night. She did not give interviews to the cadets who asked. She did not respond to the messages from Earth's media. She let her work speak for itself. One night, a month after the bout, Lisk found her sitting on the floor of their room, reading xenobiology files on her datapad. The Velani settled onto her bunk and watched her friend for a while. "Can I ask you something?" Lisk said. "Yes." "Were you scared during the fight? Were you actually scared?" Rhea set down the datapad and looked at the ceiling. "Terrified," she said. "The entire time. From the moment he called my name to the moment he hit the floor, I was terrified." Lisk's antennae rose in surprise. "You did not look it." "No, I would not. Fear is information, Lisk. It tells you what is dangerous and how much attention to pay. You can use it or it uses you. My trainers on Earth taught me that before they taught me anything else." Lisk considered this for a long time. Then she said, "Other species have started asking the human cadets for training sessions. Did you know that?" Rhea had not known. Training in what? "They are calling it adaptive combat reading. The ability to study an opponent in real time and find weaknesses during the fight itself. They say humans do this naturally." Lisk paused. 11 cadets from 6 different species have made formal requests through the academy this week alone. Rhea was quiet. She thought about what that meant. Not for her, but for every human who would come to this academy after her. Every human who would serve in the Union military. Every human who would be looked at by another species and measured not by the size of their body but by the quality of their mind. The next day, a priority message arrived through Rhea's official academy channel. It was from Earth's United Military Command, forwarded through the Union's Human Liaison Office. She read it twice to make sure she understood it correctly. She had been recommended for the Academy's Vanguard track, the elite program, the one that produced the Union's top field commanders and strategic officers, the one that no human had ever been invited to join. Someone very high up, on Earth or in the Union or both, was paying very close attention. Rhea closed the message, picked up her datapad and went back to studying. 6 months changed everything and nothing. Rhea was still the same person. She still woke before dawn. She still trained alone in the early hours when the corridors were empty and the station hummed with the quiet rhythm of sleeping beings. She still studied late, still ate quickly, still spoke only when she had something worth saying. But the world around her had shifted in ways she could feel even when she could not see them. The Vanguard track was harder than anything she had faced before. The coursework was brutal. The simulations were complex, multi-layered scenarios that required not just tactical thinking, but the ability to lead beings from species she had barely heard of. The physical demands were adjusted for each species, which meant Rhea was pushed to her absolute human limits while her classmates were pushed to theirs. There was no hiding in the Vanguard track. Every weakness was exposed. Every strength was tested until it bent. She survived. More than that, she adapted. The instructors noticed something about her that the regular program had not fully revealed. Rhea did not just learn quickly. She learned differently. Where other cadets memorized tactics and applied them, Rhea absorbed principles and rebuilt them from the ground up for each new situation. She did not fight the same way twice. She did not plan the same way twice. Every scenario was a fresh problem, and she approached it with fresh eyes. This was, the instructors quietly noted, a very human trait. Now the Academy's annual joint evaluation was approaching. It was the largest exercise of the year, a massive wargame scenario observed by Union military leadership from dozens of species. Vanguard cadets were expected to lead mixed-species fire teams through a multi-stage combat exercise in the Academy's simulation complex. The simulation complex was enormous, spanning 3 entire levels of Access Point Citadel, capable of generating any terrain, any atmosphere, any threat the programmers could imagine. Rhea was assigned a team of 4, including herself. Lisk was her first pick for tactical analysis. The Veleni had grown considerably in confidence over the past 6 months, and her ability to process battlefield data in real time was among the best in their year. Second was Morvek, a Dralith heavy assault cadet with 4 powerful legs, thick natural armor, and a deep, rumbling laugh that filled any room he entered. Morvek had approached Rhea 3 months earlier and asked to train with her. He told her honestly that he wanted to understand how humans thought about combat. He had been a loyal training partner ever since. The 4th member of her team was the one nobody expected, a young Krethsari cadet named Salith. Salith had requested assignment to Rhea's team through official channels. The request had caused considerable discussion among the Academy staff. A Krethsari cadet voluntarily serving under a human, especially this human, was unprecedented. Salith's own family had objected. Members of the Krethsari military liaison had called it an embarrassment. Salith did not care. She was younger than most Krethsari cadets, barely past the age of maturity in her species, and she belonged to a generation that was beginning to ask uncomfortable questions about the old ways. She had watched the footage of Rhea and Torvon not with shame, but with fascination. She had seen something in those 3 seconds that her elders refused to see. She had seen a better way to think about strength. The joint evaluation began on a simulated world with dense forest terrain, low visibility, and unpredictable weather cycles. The objective shifted every 2 hours. First it was a rescue extraction, then a defensive holdout, then an offensive push through enemy-held territory. The enemy forces were controlled by the Academy's advanced combat AI, which adapted to the strategies of each team in real time. There was no way to prepare a single plan and execute it. You had to think, adjust, and think again without stopping. Rhea led from the middle of her team, not from the front and not from the back. She kept Lisk close, feeding her data requests and receiving analysis in return. Morvek took point, his massive body clearing paths through the dense undergrowth while his natural armor absorbed the simulated weapons fire that came from concealed positions. Salith moved on the flanks, her Krethsari speed and strength making her an excellent scout and rapid response fighter. They worked well together, better than well. They moved like a single organism with 4 very different bodies. Rhea gave orders in short, clear phrases. She never raised her voice. She never repeated herself. She trusted each member of her team to do what they were best at, and she positioned them where their abilities mattered most. The critical moment came during the offensive phase. They were pushing through a narrow valley when the AI sprung an ambush from 3 sides. Simulated weapons fire rained down from elevated positions. Morvek was pinned behind a rock formation, his armor holding but his mobility gone. Lisk was calculating firing solutions as fast as she could, but the data was overwhelming. And Salith froze. It was the first time in the exercise that the pressure had become truly intense, and something in the young Krethsari locked up. Her legs stopped moving. Her claws dug into the ground. Her eyes went wide and fixed. It was not cowardice. It was overload. Her instincts were screaming at her to charge forward and attack, because that was what Krethsari did, but her training was telling her to hold position, and the conflict between the two had paralyzed her completely. Rhea saw it happen. She crossed the distance between them in 4 quick steps, keeping low under the simulated fire. She reached Salith and put one hand on the Krethsari's armored shoulder. She did not shout. She did not give an order. She looked up into those wide yellow eyes and spoke in a voice that was calm and steady and absolutely certain. You are not your armor, Salith. You are not your plates or your claws or your size. You are what is behind all of that, your mind. Use it, think first, then move. Something shifted in Salith's expression. The paralysis broke. The young Krethsari blinked once, twice, and then her eyes sharpened. She looked at the terrain around them. She looked at the elevated positions where the enemy fire was coming from, and she saw what Rhea had been teaching her for months. She saw the gaps. She saw the angles. She saw the path that no one was covering because the AI had not expected anyone to take it. Salith moved. She went low and fast along the valley wall, using the rock formations as cover, and hit the nearest enemy position from an angle it was not prepared for. She cleared it in seconds and moved to the next one. The flanking maneuver broke the ambush open, and Morvek surged forward to finish what she had started. The engagement was over in under 4 minutes. The AI flagged it as one of the fastest ambush recoveries in the exercise. When the joint evaluation ended, the results were posted across the academy. Rhea's team had not achieved the highest kill count. They had not completed the objectives in the fastest time, but they had achieved something that no other team in the exercise had matched. They had the fewest simulated casualties and the highest tactical efficiency score. They had lost nothing and wasted nothing. Every decision had been purposeful. Every movement had counted. The evaluators made a note in their official report. Team Vasquez exhibited unprecedented interspecies unit cohesion. Recommend further study of human-led mixed-species command structures. The closing ceremony was held in the Academy's Grand Assembly Hall. Every cadet, every instructor, and every visiting dignitary was present. The hall was vast, built to hold thousands, and it was full. Commandant Ira Saul stood at the center of the stage. Her crystalline body caught the lights and scattered them across the ceiling like stars. She spoke about the purpose of the Academy, about the founding principles of the Galactic Union, about how the Union was built on the belief that no single species held the answer to every challenge. That true strength was not found in one body or one mind, but in the ability to see the strength in others and combine it into something greater than any individual could achieve alone. She did not mention Rhea by name. She did not need to. After the ceremony, Rhea went to the observation deck on the upper ring of Axis Point Citadel. It was a quiet place, a long corridor with a transparent wall that looked out into open space. Stars stretched in every direction. A distant nebula glowed in shades of blue and purple. Transport ships moved like slow fireflies between the docking arms of the station. She stood there alone for a while, letting the silence fill her. Then she heard footsteps behind her, heavy footsteps, the sound of weight and bone and purpose. She did not turn around. Torvon Drekar stepped up beside her and stood at the window. He was close enough that she could hear the faint grinding of his bone plates when he breathed. He did not look at her. He looked out at the stars. They stood in silence for a long time. Then Torvon spoke. His voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. I have studied your people's combat philosophy, he said. In the months since our encounter, I have studied what you call Jiu-Jitsu, Aikido, Krav Maga, Wing Chun, Sambo. He paused. You have 1,000 names for the art of turning force against itself. Rhea said nothing. She waited. My people have no such word, he continued. In our language, there is no concept for redirecting an enemy's strength. We have words for crushing, breaking, dominating, overpowering, but not for what you did to me. Another long pause. We never needed such a word. We were always the strongest thing in the room. He turned his head slightly, not enough to look at her directly, just enough to acknowledge that she was there. Perhaps that is why we needed you, he said. Then he walked away. His footsteps faded down the corridor until the only sound was the hum of the station and the distant thrum of ships moving through the dark. Lisk appeared a minute later, stepping out from behind a structural column where she had very obviously been hiding. Her antennae were twitching with curiosity and something close to disbelief. Was that an apology? She asked. Rhea watched the empty corridor where Torvon had disappeared. A small smile crossed her face, the first real smile Lisk had seen from her in weeks. For a Kreth, sorry, Rhea said. That was practically a hug. Lisk made a sound that might have been a laugh, and they stood together at the window, two small beings looking out at a galaxy that was very large and very old and very dangerous. But something had changed. Out there among the stars, word was spreading. On military stations and colony worlds and trade ships and diplomatic halls, beings of every species were watching a piece of footage that lasted 3 seconds and asking questions that had no easy answers. They were looking at humanity and seeing something they had missed before. Not the soft skin, not the breakable bones, not the short lives. They were seeing the eyes. The quiet, watchful, endlessly curious eyes of a species that had spent its entire existence surrounded by things that could kill it and had responded not by growing armor or claws or venom, but by growing the one thing that frightened the galaxy more than any natural weapon: the desire to understand. And across the Union, in briefing rooms and war colleges and intelligence offices, a single question was being asked with growing frequency and growing unease. What else have the humans been studying?